What happens when a lifetime of achievement is dismissed in a single, prejudiced glance? Dr. Evelyn Reed, a woman who held the future of a multi-billion-dollar corporation in her mind, was about to find out. She had a first-class ticket, a seat she had more than earned. But to the woman staring her down, she was just a problem that didn't belong. The accusation was simple, but the fallout would be catastrophic. A shockwave that would end careers and shatter a carefully constructed world of privilege. And it all began with a condescending tone and a viciously whispered assumption from a stranger. The low melodic hum of the Boeing 707's engines was a symphony to Dr. Evelyn Reed. For most, it was the sound of travel, of vacation, of departure. For her, it was the sound of silence. It was the white noise that finally drowned out the cacophony of spectral analysis charts, geological survey data, and the incessant pinging of emails from research assistants who, despite their brilliance, still required her final sign-off on everything. She settled into seat 2A of the Global Voyager Airline's first-class cabin, the plush leather sighing under her weight. The flight from New York's JFK to Geneva was a long one, but here in this cocoon of muted beige tones and polished faux wood paneling, it was a welcome reprieve. Evelyn was a woman who lived her life in the earth, sifting through its deepest secrets. Her hands, though impeccably manicured, had mapped the mineral veins of mountains in the Andes and held core samples drilled from the ocean floor. She was a world-renowned mineralogist, and the reason for this flight was a keynote address at the World Symposium of Advanced Materials. A speech that would unveil a discovery so significant it would redefine the entire landscape of sustainable technology. She felt a familiar weariness settle deep into her bones. The last 3 months had been a relentless sprint, verifying the viability of a newly discovered deposit of dysprosium, a rare earth element, critical for the permanent magnets used in electric vehicles and wind turbines. Her work, funded by the massive Ethelred Corporation, was the linchpin of their multi-billion-dollar pivot to green technology. Marcus Thorne, Ethelred's visionary and notoriously demanding CEO, had personally called her last week. Evelyn, his voice had boomed through the phone. "You're not just our geologist. You're our future. Whatever you need, you get." What she needed was sleep. She unzipped her carry-on, a well-worn leather satchel, and pulled out a thick, dog-eared scientific journal, its pages filled with notations in her precise, angular handwriting. The flight attendant, a young woman with a warm smile, approached. "Dr. Reed. May, I get you a pre-departure beverage? We have a lovely champagne. A 2008. Dom Perignon. That would be wonderful." "Thank you," Evelyn replied, her voice a smooth, calm alto. She valued this space. It wasn't about the luxury, not really. It was about the quiet, the anonymity, the unspoken agreement among its inhabitants that they were all here to travel in peace. It was a space she had earned 10 times over, through sleepless nights, grueling field expeditions, and a mind that never ever switched off. She took a sip of the crisp, cold champagne, the bubbles a pleasant fizz against her tongue. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the hum of the cabin and the gentle clinking of glasses be her meditation. Outside, the ground crew scurried about under the bright airport lights. Inside, a fragile peace reigned. The boarding process was nearly complete, with only a few stragglers making their way down the jet bridge. Evelyn was about to lose herself in an article on isotopic fractionation when a new sound cut through the cabin's calm, a loud braying laugh, followed by a voice that seemed to take up all the available oxygen. "Richard, honestly, you'd lose your head if it wasn't screwed on. Make sure they get the Louis Vuitton in the overhead, not the Hartmann. I don't want it scratched." A woman appeared at the entrance to the first-class cabin. She was immaculately dressed in a cream-colored pantsuit that probably cost more than a graduate student's yearly stipend. Her blonde hair was coiffed into a severe, unmoving helmet, and her face was a mask of expensive makeup and profound self-satisfaction. She surveyed the cabin not as a passenger, but as a queen surveying her court. Her eyes, sharp and dismissive, swept over the occupants before landing and sticking on Evelyn. Evelyn felt the gaze like a physical touch, a prickle of annoyance on her skin. She had seen that look 1,000 times before. It was the look that questioned her presence in boardrooms, at academic conferences, and in high-end restaurants. It was a look that contained a universe of assumptions in a single, fleeting microsecond. Ignoring it, Evelyn turned her attention back to her journal. But the woman, her voice a theatrical stage whisper to her harried-looking husband, trailing behind her, wasn't finished. "Well, look at that," the woman said, her voice dripping with something that masqueraded as surprise, but landed as pure acid. "They're really letting everyone up here these days." Evelyn's grip tightened on her champagne flute. The sanctuary had been breached. The silence was about to be broken. The woman in the cream pantsuit handed her fur-collared coat to a flight attendant without a glance, as if dismissing a servant. She then pointed a perfectly manicured finger, adorned with a diamond the size of a hazelnut, directly at Evelyn. "Excuse me," she said, her voice no longer a whisper, but a sharp, clear command that sliced through the cabin's quiet murmur. "I believe you're in my seat." Evelyn looked up slowly, meeting the woman's cold blue eyes. She then glanced at her boarding pass, which lay on the small table beside her. "Seat 2A. She looked at the illuminated number above her head. 2A. There was no mistake. "I don't believe so," Evelyn said, her tone even and devoid of emotion. "My ticket is for this seat." The woman who Evelyn would soon come to know as Karen Foster let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Oh, honey, that's a sweet thought, but this is first class. Mistakes happen. I'm sure your seat is a little further back." She gestured vaguely towards the curtain separating them from the rest of the plane. The condescension was a physical force pressing down on the space between them. Her husband, a portly man with a perpetually nervous expression named Richard, shifted his weight from one expensive loafer to the other. "Karen, please let's just check the tickets." "Richard, don't be dense," she snapped without looking at him. Her entire focus was a laser beam on Evelyn. "My seat is 2A. It's always 2A. The company arranges it." She turned back to Evelyn. "Now, if you'll just move, we can all get settled." The other passengers were beginning to notice. A man in a tailored suit across the aisle lowered his newspaper. A young couple in front stopped their quiet conversation. The air, once relaxed, was now tight with tension. Evelyn refused to be flustered. She had faced down armed guards at illegal mining operations and stared into the maw of a volcano. She would not be intimidated by a woman in a pantsuit. "My boarding pass clearly states 2A, Evelyn repeated, holding it up slightly. "Perhaps your seat is 2A on a different flight?" Karen's face, which had been a mask of arrogant certainty, began to curdle with genuine anger. "Are you implying I can't read? I know what flight I'm on." She took a step closer, invading Evelyn's personal space. "Let me see that." Before Evelyn could react, Karen snatched the boarding pass from her hand. She squinted at it, her lips tightening into a thin, ugly line. The name Dr. Evelyn Reed was clearly printed. For a moment she looked confused, but the confusion was quickly steamrolled by her indignation. "This is obviously a mistake," Karen declared, waving the ticket as if it were fraudulent. "A computer glitch. There's no way you're supposed to be here, and I'm not." The implication hung heavy and poisonous in the air. "You don't belong here." Evelyn held out her hand. "Please give me back my property." "Not until this is sorted out," Karen huffed. She flagged down the flight attendant who had served Evelyn her champagne. The young woman whose name tag read Sarah hurried over her warm smile, replaced by a look of nervous apprehension. "There's a problem here," Karen announced, her voice resonating with the authority of someone used to getting her way. "This person," she said, gesturing at Evelyn as if she were an inanimate object, "is in my seat. She has a ticket that's clearly been issued in error, and she's refusing to move." Sarah, the flight attendant, looked from Karen's furious face to Evelyn's unnervingly calm one. "Ma'am, could I see your boarding pass, please?" she asked Karen. Richard Foster fumbled in his jacket and produced his wife's ticket. Sarah took both passes, her hands trembling slightly. She looked at Karen's seat 4D. She looked at Evelyn's seat 2A. "It seems there's been a misunderstanding, Mrs. Foster," Sarah said timidly. "Your assigned seat is 4D. Dr. Reed is in the correct seat." Karen's face went from pink to a dangerous shade of crimson. "That's impossible. That's unacceptable. Richard's seat is 4C. We are supposed to be together. This is a simpleton's mistake." She turned her fury on the young flight attendant. "I pay a ridiculous amount of money for this airline's top-tier status. I will not be shoved into the back of the cabin because of your incompetence. Now you tell her to move." The her was once again Evelyn. She was being systematically dehumanized, reduced from a person to a problem. Evelyn stood up slowly, her 5'9" frame unfolding with a quiet grace that seemed to further infuriate Karen. "There is nothing to sort out." Evelyn said, her voice low, but carrying an unmistakable edge of steel. "This is my seat. You are causing a disturbance. I would like you to return my boarding pass and quote your assigned seat." "How dare you!" Karen shrieked, the last vestige of her composure shattering. "You're the one who doesn't belong here. You probably used some kind of discount voucher or affirmative action program to get this seat. This is a space for our most valued customers, not for people like you." The cabin fell into a dead, shocked silence. The ugly truth of the confrontation was now laid bare for everyone to see. It wasn't about a seat. It was about race. It was about a world view so poisoned by prejudice that the sight of a black woman in first class could only be interpreted as an error, a violation of the natural order. Sarah, the flight attendant, looked horrified, but also utterly lost. She was a deer in the headlights, completely unequipped to handle this level of venom. Evelyn felt a cold, hard knot form in her stomach. It was the familiar feeling of righteous anger, an emotion she had learned to control and channel over a lifetime of such encounters. But this was different. The sheer, unadulterated entitlement was breathtaking. "That's enough," Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, yet it cut through the silence like a razor. "You've said quite enough." But Karen Foster was not done. She turned to the flight attendant, her voice rising to a fever pitch. "I want to speak to your manager. Now get this person in charge. I will not spend one more second being spoken to this way. I want her removed from this plane." The demand for a manager hung in the air, an ultimatum that paralyzed the young flight attendant. Sarah looked helplessly at Evelyn, then back at the apoplectic Karen Foster. She was hopelessly out of her depth. I'll get the station manager." "Ma'am?" Sarah stammered before making a hasty retreat towards the cockpit, clearly relieved to be escaping the blast radius. Richard Foster finally found his voice, tugging weakly at his wife's arm. "Karen, for heaven's sake, just sit down in 4D. It's a few feet away. We'll sort it out later." "Don't you tell me to sit down." "Richard," she hissed, yanking her arm away. "This is a matter of principle. It's about respect. It's about the airline making a catastrophic error and this woman's unbelievable arrogance." She folded her arms, planting her feet, as if preparing for a siege. She was putting on a performance, for the other passengers casting herself as the victim of corporate incompetence and social insurgency. Evelyn simply sat back down in her seat. It was a deliberate, calculated act of defiance. She would not be moved. She picked up her champagne flute, took a slow, deliberate sip, and then reopened her journal. She refused to give Karen the satisfaction of a continued argument. Her silence, her calm, was its own form of protest. It was a refusal to be dragged down into the muck. This, of course, only enraged Karen further. To be ignored was in her world the ultimate insult. "Do you see that?" she said to the cabin at large. "The sheer audacity, she's sitting there sipping champagne as if she hasn't a care in the world, as if she didn't just try to steal my seat." The man across the aisle finally spoke up. He was in his late 60s, with a mane of white hair and an air of quiet authority. "Ma'am, I think you're mistaken. The lady was here before you, and the flight attendant confirmed her ticket. You are the one creating a scene." Karen whirled on him. "You stay out of this. This doesn't concern you." "It concerns all of us," the man replied coolly. "When a passenger is being publicly harassed." The accusation of harassment caused Karen to recoil, as if struck. "Harassed? I am the one being harassed. My travel plans are in disarray, and I'm being disrespected." Minutes stretched into an eternity. The cabin was a tableau of discomfort. Passengers stared intently at their phones. The floor, the ceiling, anywhere but at the unfolding drama. Richard Foster looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. And Evelyn continued to read, or at least pretend to read, the article on isotopic fractionation. Each word a shield against the venom being spewed just inches from her. Finally, a man in a crisp Global Voyager Airlines uniform appeared. He was of medium height, with neatly combed black hair and a name tag that read, "David Chen, Station Manager." His face was a practiced mask of professional concern, but his eyes darted around quickly, assessing the situation: one irate, expensively dressed woman, one calm woman sitting in the disputed seat, and a cabin full of tense, silent witnesses. He approached Karen Foster first, the path of least resistance. "Mrs. Foster, I'm David Chen. I understand there's some issue with your seating." "Issue is putting it mildly," Karen said, her voice thick with vindication. "This airline has made a complete mess of my booking. My husband and I are separated, and this woman," she jabbed a finger towards Evelyn, "again, has been placed in my seat, 2A. She is refusing to move, and she has been incredibly rude." David Chen's professional smile tightened. He turned to Evelyn, his expression shifting subtly. He no longer looked like a problem solver, but like a principal dealing with a troublesome student. His immediate assumption, guided by the path of least resistance, was that the loudest, most aggressive person was the one who held the power. "Ma'am?" He began, his tone polite but firm. "I'm sure we can sort this out quickly. If you would just come with me to the gate, we can look at the system and find your correct seat." Evelyn slowly lowered her journal. She looked at David Chen, and in her gaze was a profound disappointment. He hadn't asked for her side of the story. He hadn't verified the facts with his own eyes. He had walked in, seen a black woman and a furious white woman, and immediately decided who needed to be handled. He had asked her to move to deplane, to be the one inconvenienced, implicitly validating Karen's baseless accusations. "I am in my correct seat," Evelyn said, her voice dangerously quiet. "My boarding pass, which that woman is still holding, confirms it. The flight attendant has confirmed it. There is nothing to sort out at the gate." David Chen's patience was clearly wearing thin. The flight was already behind schedule. "Ma'am, I understand, but to resolve this, we need to avoid any further disruption. The easiest way to do that is to step off the aircraft for a moment while we review the booking. I assure you we will get you on your way." Easiest for whom, Evelyn thought. Easiest for him. Easiest for the airline. Easiest for Karen Foster. His solution was to remove the target of the abuse, not the abuser. "No," Evelyn said. The word was soft, but it landed with the finality of a gavel. "I will not be moving. I will not be deplaning. I am a ticketed first-class passenger in my assigned seat. This woman has harassed me, insulted me, and accused me of theft, and you are asking me to leave unacceptable." David Chen's face hardened. His professional mask slipped, revealing a flash of frustration. He had a schedule to keep. He saw this not as an issue of justice, but of logistics. "Ma'am, if you refuse to cooperate with the ground staff," he said, the implied threat clear in his voice, "I will have to consider you a disruptive passenger, and that will have consequences I'm sure you'd like to avoid." The threat hung in the air. He was threatening to have her removed the very thing Karen Foster had demanded. He had sided with the aggressor. The injustice of it was so profound, so utterly infuriating that the cold knot of anger in Evelyn's stomach began to burn. She had been patient. She had been polite. She had endured the insults with a grace Karen Foster could never comprehend. But she had reached her limit. They had mistaken her composure for weakness. A colossal miscalculation. The term disruptive passenger echoed in the silent cabin. It was a formal, clinical term for a situation that was anything but. It was a label that could get a person blacklisted from an airline, a permanent stain on their record. And David Chen had just brandished it like a weapon aimed directly at the victim of the disruption. Evelyn looked at him. Truly, looked at him for the first time. She saw a man under pressure, a man trying to clear a problem from his checklist. He saw a problem, not a person. He saw an obstacle to an on-time departure, not a distinguished scientist being subjected to racist abuse. This realization solidified her resolve. "Are you truly threatening to remove me from this flight?" Evelyn asked, her voice calm, almost conversational. It was a stark contrast to Karen Foster's histrionics and David Chen's escalating frustration. "Let me be perfectly clear. I am Dr. Evelyn Reed. I am in seat 2A of this flight to Geneva, for which I have a valid ticket. I have been verbally assaulted and publicly humiliated by this other passenger, and your response is to threaten me." David Chen was caught off guard by her poise. He had expected shouting or tears or a grudging capitulation. This articulate, icy calm was something he wasn't prepared for. But he had already committed to a course of action and felt he couldn't back down without losing face. I am simply trying to resolve this situation. Doctor, he said with a slight, almost mocking emphasis on her title, as if he didn't quite believe it. The quickest resolution is for you to step outside with me. The just resolution, Evelyn countered, is for you to check your passenger manifest, confirm my ticket for the 3rd time, and then instruct Mrs. Foster to take her assigned seat in 4D, or be removed from this flight for causing a disturbance. Karen Foster gasped, clutching her pearls in a caricature of shock. Me removed. I am the injured party. Here, I am a Global Voyager Diamond Medallion member. I have flown millions of miles with this airline. Who is she? Nobody. It was a fatal misstep. The appeal to status, to loyalty programs, and tiered privilege was the foundation of Karen's worldview. She believed her diamond medallion card was a shield that made her untouchable. David Chen, a man whose entire career was built around catering to such high-status individuals, found his footing again. He nodded at Karen sympathetically. Ma'am, I understand. Let me handle this. He turned back to Evelyn, his face now a stern, uncompromising mask. Dr. Reed, this is your final chance. Please come with me, or I will be forced to call airport security to escort you off the plane. The cabin drew a collective breath. It had come to this. A manager choosing to believe the loud, entitled woman over the quiet, dignified one was about to forcibly remove a paying customer from her rightful seat. Richard Foster looked like he was having a heart attack. He grabbed his wife's arm again, this time with more force. Karen, stop this. My God, just stop. Richard let go of me. This is finally being handled correctly, she said, beaming triumphantly. But Evelyn did not move. She did not flinch. The fire in her stomach had cooled into something solid and unmovable, like obsidian. She had spent her entire life navigating worlds where she was underestimated, where her presence was questioned. She had learned that sometimes the only way to break down a wall of prejudice is not to chip away at it, but to detonate the foundation. She held David Chen's gaze. You are making a catastrophic mistake, Mr. Chen. One that will have repercussions you cannot possibly imagine. Not for me. For you. For this airline. Her words were delivered without a hint of melodrama. They were stated as a fact, like a geological certainty. The conviction in her voice was so absolute that it gave David Chen a brief, fleeting moment of doubt. A flicker of unease crossed his face. Who was this woman? But the doubt was quickly extinguished by the pressure of the moment. The flight attendants were looking at him. The passengers were watching. Karen Foster was preening, expecting him to follow through. His professional pride was on the line. I'm sorry you feel that way, he said, his voice cold and official. He reached for the intercom phone on the wall to call for security. His thumb hovered over the button. In that split second, the man in the suit across the aisle, who had been watching the entire exchange, discreetly took out his phone. He angled it slightly downwards and pressed record. He knew injustice when he saw it, and he had a feeling the world needed to see this too. David Chen's misjudgment was now complete. He had ignored the evidence. He had placated the aggressor. He had threatened the victim. And he was about to press a button that would seal his fate and the fate of Karen Foster in ways he could never have anticipated. He was standing on a precipice, utterly blind to the chasm below. As David Chen's thumb moved towards the call button, Evelyn spoke again. Her voice was not loud, but it had an acoustic property that seemed to make all other sounds irrelevant. It sliced through the tension with the precision of a scalpel. Before you make that call, Mr. Chen, I suggest you do one more thing. Pull up the full passenger manifest, not just the seat map on your little handheld device. I mean the full VVIP manifest from your corporate system. David was irritated. This was just another stalling tactic. Ma'am, there's no need. Oh, but there is. Evelyn interrupted, her eyes boring into his. When you access that file, I want you to look for my name, Dr. Evelyn Reed. And I want you to look very closely at the booking notes. Specifically, look for the notation made by the office of Marcus Thorne. The name dropped into the cabin like a 10-ton weight. Marcus Thorne. Even the other passengers, cocooned in their own worlds, recognized that name. Marcus Thorne wasn't just a CEO. He was a titan of industry, a figure as recognizable as Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk. He was the founder and CEO of the Ethelred Corporation, a global conglomerate whose portfolio included tech energy and, as of a recent multi-billion-dollar acquisition, Global Voyager Airlines. Thorne was a legend known for his genius, his vision, and his notoriously volcanic temper when it came to incompetence. David Chen froze. His thumb was a millimeter from the button. The name Marcus Thorne was a lightning bolt that short-circuited his entire thought process. VVIP bookings from the CEO's office were the stuff of legend among airline staff. They were handled with the reverence of a holy text. They were for board members, heads of state, and individuals so critical to Ethelred's operations that their comfort was paramount. A mistake involving a Thorne booking wasn't just a customer service issue. It was a career extinction event. A cold sweat broke out on his forehead. His practiced confidence evaporated, replaced by a raw, naked panic. Could she be telling the truth? The way she said the name, not with arrogance, but with the casual familiarity of someone who knew it meant something was terrifying. Karen Foster, however, was unimpressed. She didn't recognize the immediate, hierarchical terror the name inspired. Marcus Thorne. Don't be ridiculous. You're just a name-dropper. Richard knows people at Ethelred. You don't know Marcus Thorne. Her husband, Richard, however, did understand. He looked as if he'd been tasered. His face, already pale with anxiety, went completely ashen. He worked in middle management at one of Ethelred's subsidiaries. To him, Marcus Thorne was less a man, and more of a distant, wrathful god. He started pulling at his wife's sleeve with frantic, desperate tugs. Karen shut up. Please, for the love of God, just be quiet now. David Chen fumbled for his corporate tablet, his hands shaking so badly he could barely type his login credentials. He stabbed at the screen, his face illuminated by its cold blue light. The seconds ticked by, each one an eternity. The cabin was so quiet, you could hear the faint whir of the tablet's processor. Evelyn watched him, her expression unreadable. She had laid her trap. Now she was simply waiting for it to spring. David's eyes widened. He scrolled frantically, his breathing becoming shallow. Then he stopped. His face lost all its color. He looked as though he had seen a ghost. On the screen, visible to anyone who dared to look, was the passenger manifest. And there it was. Reed Evelyn, Dr. Siat, 2A status, VVIP Alpha. Booking notes. Personal travel arranged by Office of Emsworth Thorne, Ethelred Corp. Passenger is critical to Project Chimera. Extend every possible courtesy. Report any and all issues directly to Thorne's executive assistant. No exceptions. Project Chimera. David had seen internal memos about it. It was the company's most important, most secret, most expensive venture. It was the future of the entire Ethelred Corporation, and this woman, Dr. Evelyn Reed, was critical to it. He had just threatened to have a VVIP alpha passenger, a personal guest of the CEO and the linchpin of their most important project, arrested. He had called her a disruptive passenger. He had sided with a loud-mouthed Diamond Medallion member over a person Marcus Thorne himself had designated as untouchable. He felt a wave of nausea wash over him. In the space of 10 minutes, he had not just made a mistake. He had professionally immolated himself. He slowly looked up from the tablet, his eyes filled with a horror so profound it was almost pitiable. He looked at Dr. Evelyn Reed, and for the first time he didn't see a problem. He saw a woman of immense, terrifying importance, a woman who held his entire career in the palm of her hand. The power dynamic in the cabin didn't just shift, it underwent a seismic tectonic inversion. The turning point had arrived, and what came next would be a spectacle no one on that flight would ever forget. The silence that followed David Chen's discovery was different. It was no longer tense. It was heavy with the suffocating weight of his realization. He lowered the tablet as if it were made of lead, his movements stiff and robotic. His gaze fixed on Dr. Reed was a mixture of awe, terror, and groveling apology. Dr. Reed. He began, his voice a hoarse, strangled whisper. It was unrecognizable from the confident, authoritative tone he had used just moments before. I apologize. There has been a grave misunderstanding. Karen Foster watched this exchange with a look of utter bewilderment. She couldn't comprehend the sudden dramatic shift. What's going on? What does it say? David, what is the problem? David didn't even hear her. His entire world had shrunk to the space between himself and Dr. Reed. He took a hesitant step forward, his body language transforming from one of authority to one of utter supplication. Ma'am, Dr. Reed, I cannot express how deeply sorry I am for my misjudgment, he stammered, his eyes pleading. I was misinformed. I acted rashly, inexcusably. Evelyn simply watched him, her expression unchanged. She offered him no lifeline, no comforting "it's okay." She let him dangle in the wind of his own making. Then David Chen did something that sent a ripple of shock through the entire cabin. He clasped his hands in front of him and bowed. It was not a simple nod of the head. It was a deep, formal bow from the waist, a gesture of profound respect and deference that one might see in the court of an emperor. It was a complete and total surrender. Please, he said, his voice trembling as he held the bow. Allow me to rectify this. Immediately. He straightened up and whirled around, his panic now channeled into a frantic, desperate energy to appease. His eyes landed on Karen Foster, and for the first time, he saw her not as a high-value customer, but as the source of his impending doom. The thin veneer of customer service vanished, replaced by an icy fury. Mrs. Foster, he said, his voice now sharp and laced with venom. You have caused a severe disturbance on this aircraft. You have harassed a distinguished guest of this airline. You have made false accusations and refused to follow crew instructions. Your seat is 4D. You will take that seat now, or you will be removed from this flight. The tables had turned with breathtaking speed. Karen Foster was stunned into silence. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish, but no sound came out. Her entire reality, built on a foundation of privilege and entitlement, had just been demolished. But my status, she finally managed to sputter. Your status does not give you the right to abuse other passengers, David snapped. He turned to the flight attendant. Sarah, who had been watching from the galley wide-eyed. Sarah. Please escort Mrs. Foster to seat 4D. Bring Dr. Reed a fresh bottle of Dom Perignon, the finest caviar we have on board, and anything else she desires. Her comfort is our absolute top priority. He then turned his attention to Richard Foster, whose face was a mask of pure terror. And you, sir, I suggest you get your wife under control. Immediately. Richard, finally spurred into action by the threat of being thrown off the plane, grabbed Karen's arm and practically dragged her down the aisle. Karen, that's enough. We're sitting down now. Her protests were reduced to pathetic, incoherent mutters as he shoved her into the window seat of row 4 and buckled her in as one might a recalcitrant child. The cabin began to buzz with whispered conversations. The man across the aisle gave Evelyn a small, respectful nod, then discreetly stopped his recording. He had all he needed. David Chen. His face, still pale and slick with sweat, turned back to Evelyn. The bow had not been enough. He needed to do more. He knelt beside her seat, a humiliating posture for a manager in a crowded cabin. Dr. Reed, he said, his voice low and desperate. On behalf of Global Voyager Airlines, I offer my most sincere and humble apologies. My conduct was unprofessional and unforgivable. Is there anything, absolutely anything I can do to make this right? Would you like me to move you to a more private seat? Would you like the entire row to yourself? I can have these other passengers moved. Evelyn finally spoke. No. Mr. Chen, she said, her voice calm but resonant with power. That won't be necessary. You have already done enough. What I would like is to be left alone to enjoy the rest of my flight in peace. She paused, letting the weight of her next words settle. And I would like my boarding pass back. Karen Foster, who was still holding the crumpled ticket, was nudged violently by her husband. She numbly passed it forward, and it was relayed to David Chen like a holy relic. He smoothed it out with trembling fingers and presented it to Evelyn with both hands as if it were an offering. She took it, placed it on her table, and picked up her journal. She had won. It wasn't a victory she had sought, but it was a total and absolute one. As she turned the page, she was keenly aware of Karen Foster 4 rows back, staring daggers at her. Karen's world had been turned upside down, but the real consequences, the hard karma, had not even begun to ripple outwards yet. They were coming for her and her husband, and they would be far worse than a simple seating mix-up. As the Boeing 727 finally pushed back from the gate and climbed into the night sky, a fragile, awkward peace settled over the first-class cabin. Flight attendants tiptoed around, speaking in hushed tones. David Chen had vanished presumably to write the most carefully worded and self-flagellating incident report of his life. Evelyn was treated with a reverence usually reserved for royalty. Her champagne glass was never empty, and a small mountain of gourmet food was presented to her, most of which she politely declined. But 4 rows back in 4D, a different drama was unfolding. Karen Foster was in a state of silent, simmering rage. Her humiliation was total. She glared out the window, refusing to speak to her husband. Richard Foster, meanwhile, was in the throes of a full-blown panic attack. He understood the corporate calculus far better than his wife. Karen, do you have any idea what you've done? He whispered, his voice shaking. What I've done, she hissed back, her voice low and venomous. I was publicly degraded. That manager bowed to her after she stole my seat. She didn't steal your seat, Karen. And that woman, Dr. Reed, the VVIP booking from Thorne's office, Project Chimera. Richard's mind was racing, connecting the dots with sickening speed. Project Chimera was the talk of the company, the next-generation engine technology that was going to save Ethelred billions. And his wife had just assaulted, in a manner of speaking, the person Marcus Thorne considered critical to it. "What does your stupid project have to do with anything?" Karen scoffed. "It has everything to do with everything," Richard whispered frantically. "I'm up for the vice president position for European logistics on that project. The final interviews are next month. My entire career is riding on this." The first glimmer of understanding and fear finally pierced Karen's bubble of indignation. "What are you saying I'm saying?" Richard said, his voice cracking. "That you just picked a fight with a woman who is probably on a first-name basis with the man who holds my entire future in his hands. And there were witnesses, a cabin full of them. He was more right than he knew. While they were whispering, the man from seat 2B, a tech investor named Michael Lawson, was connecting to the plane's Wi-Fi. He reviewed the video he'd shot. It was perfect. It captured Karen's initial confrontation, her racist undertones, her demands for a manager, and David Chen's catastrophic threat to remove Dr. Reed. He uploaded the 2-minute clip to Twitter, now X, with a simple caption, "On at Global Voyager, Air Flight 112, JFK, to GVA. Witnessed a woman of color, Dr. Evelyn Reed, be told she doesn't belong in first class. Manager tried to have her removed until he found out she was a VVIP guest of the CEO. Disgusting. Hat flying, while black, #Global Voyager." By the time the plane was over the Atlantic, the video had exploded. It was a viral firestorm. The hashtag #Global Voyager was trending. News outlets were picking it up. Corporate and social justice accounts were retweeting it with furious commentary. The court of public opinion was in session, and the verdict was swift and brutal. Simultaneously, another more private firestorm was brewing. David Chen's incident report, marked urgent and flagged with every possible corporate alert, had landed in the inbox of Marcus Thorne's executive assistant in New York. The assistant, a notoriously efficient woman named Maria, knew her boss's temper. She also knew the name Dr. Evelyn Reed. She had booked the ticket herself. She immediately forwarded the report, along with a link to the now viral video, to Thorne's personal email with the subject line, "Critical Incident, Dr. Reed Project Chimera." Marcus Thorne was at his home in Connecticut, reviewing quarterly projections. His phone buzzed. He read the email, his expression darkening. He clicked the link and watched the 2-minute video. He saw the condescension. He heard the insults. He watched the manager he had indirectly hired threaten to remove the brilliant scientist upon whom his company's entire future hinged. But what made his blood run cold was when the camera panned briefly to the aggressor's flustered husband. He recognized him instantly. Richard Foster, the man from the logistics division, the man whose promotion package was sitting on his desk pending final approval. He was married to that woman. Thorne's anger was a physical thing. It was cold, precise, and absolute. He didn't shout. He didn't throw things. He simply picked up his phone and made 2 calls. The first was to the head of Global Voyager Airlines. "Your station manager at JFK, David Chen, is fired, effective immediately. And I want a public apology issued to Dr. Reed before her flight even lands. I don't care what time it is." The second call was to his head of human resources. That promotion for Richard Foster in logistics. It's not just denied. I want his access to all Ethelred systems revoked, immediately. His employment is terminated. I want him gone by morning. The reputational risk is unacceptable. His family is a liability we will not tolerate. While Evelyn slept peacefully somewhere over the ocean, the karmic engine her harasser had ignited was roaring at full throttle. It was tearing through careers and shattering lives. Karen Foster had wanted Evelyn removed from the plane. Instead, she had succeeded only in getting her husband removed from his job and his entire career. The consequences were no longer rippling. They were a tidal wave, and it was about to crash down on the Fosters the moment they landed in Geneva. The plane touched down smoothly at Geneva Airport under a cool grey dawn. As it taxied to the gate, the passengers began to stir, gathering their belongings. Evelyn felt a sense of profound relief. The ordeal was over. She just wanted to get to her hotel, prepare for her speech, and put the entire unpleasant incident behind her. But the airline had other plans. As the jet bridge connected, the lead flight attendant approached Evelyn's seat. "Dr. Reed, please remain seated for a moment. We have a representative from our executive office here to meet you." Evelyn sighed. She didn't want a fuss. But before she could protest, a woman in a sharp, dark suit boarded the plane, bypassing all the other deplaning passengers. She made a beeline for Evelyn. "Dr. Reed, I am Jean-Luc Picard, Vice President of European Operations for Global Voyager." She said, her accent a crisp blend of French and English. "On behalf of our entire company, from our CEO down, I am here to offer our most profound and unreserved apology for the disgraceful treatment you endured on this flight. It was inexcusable, and we are taking immediate and severe action to ensure nothing like this ever happens again." Her apology was sincere and direct. Behind her, other passengers, including Michael Lawson, who filmed the video, watched with approval. Meanwhile, a few rows back, Richard Foster's phone, which he had just switched on, began to vibrate uncontrollably. A flood of emails and texts poured in. The first was a notification from IT. "Your access to the Ethelred network has been suspended." The second was an email from HR with the subject, "Urgent, your employment status." The third was a text from his boss, Rich. "What the hell did you do?" "Call me." He opened the email from HR. His hands were shaking so violently he could barely read the words, due to a severe breach of the company's code of conduct and actions resulting in significant reputational damage to the corporation. "Your employment with Ethelred Subsidiary Logistics is terminated effective immediately." Terminated. The word seemed to leap off the screen. Not passed over for promotion. Fired. Blacklisted. His 30-year career gone. Vaporized in the time it took to fly across the Atlantic. "No," he whispered, the sound a ragged exhalation of disbelief. "No, no, no." Karen, oblivious, was gathering her bags. "Richard, hurry up. I want to get out of here. I'm going to write the most scathing letter this airline has ever received." "Karen," he said, his voice hollow. He held up the phone. "I've been fired." What she snapped, still not grasping the magnitude. "What do you mean, fired? That's impossible. You're their best logistics man. It's because of you." He said, the accusation finally landing with its full devastating weight. "It's because of what you did on the plane. They fired me because of you." The truth finally hit her. The VVIP, Project Chimera, Marcus Thorne. It wasn't just about a seat. It was about her husband's career, their lifestyle, their future. Her need to feel superior, her casual ingrained racism, had cost them everything. The beautiful house, the country club membership, the diamond on her finger. All of it was funded by the job her arrogance had just destroyed. Her face a mask of indignant rage for the past 7 hours, finally crumpled. The color drained from it, replaced by a grey, pasty shock. She sank back into her seat, utterly defeated. As Evelyn was personally escorted off the plane by the vice president, she passed row 4. She saw the Fosters a portrait of ruin. Richard was staring blankly at his phone, a man whose life had just been dismantled. Karen was weeping silently, her expensive makeup running in dark streaks down her face. Their world of privilege had proven to be a house of cards, and a single well-aimed word of truth had brought it all down. Evelyn felt no pity, but also no glee. It was simply the logical conclusion. An action and its equal opposite reaction. Later that day, in her hotel suite overlooking Lake Geneva, Evelyn received a personal call. "Dr. Reed. It's Marcus Thorne. I am calling to apologize personally. What happened on that flight was a disgrace. The people responsible have been dealt with. I hope you'll accept my apology, and not let this incident tarnish our professional relationship. Your work is too important." "Apology accepted, Marcus," Evelyn said calmly. "I'm not easily deterred. I have a speech to give tomorrow." She hung up the phone and looked out the window. The water was calm. The sky was clearing. The ugliness of the flight was fading, a distant storm that had passed. She had been tested, and she had not bent. She had been challenged, and she had prevailed not through shouting, but through the quiet, unshakable power of her own worth. The world had tried to put her in her place, but had discovered to its great cost that her place was exactly where she chose it to be. Dr. Evelyn Reed's story is a powerful reminder that dignity isn't determined by the class you fly, but by the character you possess. The world is full of people who judge a book by its cover, but karma, as we've seen, has a funny way of making sure everyone reads the final devastating chapter. The powerful ripple effect of one woman's quiet strength and unassailable achievement toppled an empire of arrogance, proving that true status is not something you buy, but something you build. It's a lesson the Fosters and a disgraced airline manager learned the hard way. If you believe that respect should be earned, not assumed, and that actions must always have consequences, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in Dr. Reed's situation? Don't forget to like this video if her story resonated with you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more true stories of justice and unexpected karma.